He was doing so well and it all just fell apart. Does that sound familiar? Whether you support children, adults, or individuals living with dementia, you've probably seen someone who make progress only to suddenly slip backwards. But what if that regression isn't rebellion, laziness, or some kind of manipulation? What if it's a safety signal? Today, we're reframing regression and showing why going backwards is often the first step in moving forwards. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Welcome back to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker. And today we're unpacking a behavior that confuses so many people, regression. You know the scenario, you see a young person managing better, communicating well, making progress, and then suddenly they're hitting, crying, refusing, or withdrawing again. Or an adult with a learning disability who's coping with change until one day they're back to using earlier behaviors they hadn't shown in months. The knee-jerk reaction is frustration, but they were doing so well. We think they've slipped, given up, or chosen to misbehave potentially, but regression is almost never a choice. It's sometimes a signal. From a psychological perspective, regression is a return to earlier developmental behaviors. When the current situation becomes overwhelming, it's deeply connected to things like attachment theory. When someone feels unsafe physically or emotionally, they instinctively return to familiar behaviors that once brought comfort or control. Now, I think we can all relate to this, that maybe, depending if you've got a positive relationship with your primary caregivers, for instance, even as an adult, sometimes there's nothing more comforting than that primary caregiver allowing you to regress to a more nurturing state of being. I know many adults who sometimes go, I just like to go home and mum just still strokes my hair and makes me feel better, as an example. There's an allowance and a safety in that regressed space where you can go back to what feels comfortable, what feels good. Now, in my book, Targeting the Positive, I share the story of Charlie and Alex. So Charlie was a teenager who experienced trauma of building trust with his foster carer. One day, he suddenly refused to come out of his room, reverting to kind of childlike behavior and disengaging and not going back to school. Now, it looked like defiance, but Alex recognized the signs of emotional overwhelm. Instead of punishing or pushing, he responded with increasing nurturing, trying to rebuild the oxytocin and the connective relationship between them. Within days, Charlie moved forwards again, because when you meet someone where they are, they tend to feel safe enough to grow. The instinct is just trying to talk them out of it, tell them off. But remember, this is a completely emotional state. This isn't a rational thought process. I'm going to regress. This is a case of they want to regress to a place where they feel safe. And this kind of thing happens in all sorts of settings. Early years, for instance, a child who's toilet trained starts then having accidents after they move home. The family moved to a new house. Okay? It's not failure, it's just need for reassurance. They're feeling unsettled and therefore they've regressed a little bit. Or we might have an adult with learning disabilities that, someone who's been making independent travel plans suddenly refuses to leave the house. Could it be sensory overload, fear, grief? Just masked as a regression. Now let's flip the narrative. Rather than taking it regression as rebellion, it's a message. I don't feel safe enough to keep growing or moving forwards in this moment. Psychologically, regression. So in Freudian theory, obviously, although Freud has most been discredited, he did have some good concepts where under stress, people revert to earlier stages of development as a defense mechanism. Now, even then, John Bowlby, as far as attachment theory is concerned, emphasized that when a secure base is threatened, people, particularly children, revert to behaviors that once secured care or stability. Prime example, let me give you an example of this. Like, you may know somebody that when they're nervous, they start to go back to kind of class clown jokerish. That's their kind of coping mechanism. It's a bit more childlike in the way that they're kind of interacting and engaging. Well, that's a prime example. Now, for individuals with dementia, obviously, it's important to acknowledge a slight difference in nuance. Dementia, obviously, is a neurodegenerative condition. And what we interpret as regression is not about moving backwards. It's part of the condition. They're reassessing, they're reaccessing older, deeper neural pathways, and newer ones become less accessible. And let me put this into a concept that may make sense. So in my book, I can't really remember where I came from, and I do have to admit it's not original. We talk about the brain forest analogy, and I talk about the brain being like a forest. And when we're young, it's like a meadow, and as we get older, it grows and grows and grows. But every neuron pathway, every skill, every memory, every conditioned response, whatever it is, are all pathways through this forest. And with something like dementia, it causes the forest start dying and kind of trees to start blocking some of the paths. But if I work on a premise that when we're feeling lost, when we're feeling uncertain, we sometimes go back to old, safe pathways. And I use an example of this myself. You know, I'm a smoker or former smoker. I smoked from the age of 16 to 25, and then I quit for years. And then I went for a major relationship breakdown. And what was the first thing that I wanted to do was pick up that cigarette again because I felt lost. I went back to something that I used to use to help me manage stress or to cope. As we're walking those paths through the forest, we retreat to memories, routines, and behaviors that once kept us safe. Now, whether that's because, like dementia, logs are falling across the pathways, or just circumstances feel uncertain, we've got no familiarity in this particular circumstance, and therefore, again, some children or adults may regress back to old pathways at any time. Recognize that when you're seeing this regression, is a form of communication, like all behavior is. Ask what's changed in their world. Is there anything that seems to have unsettled them? Is there any trauma transition or anything like that's occurring? Is it a new environment, a new person in life? Is it a change in medication or circumstances or emotional stresses going on? And sometimes things that may perceive positive could actually be something that is calling them an element of distress or anxiety. I sometimes refer to this one of my courses where it was a lady who found out she was going to be an auntie, which should be something for most people who are happy. But because of her circumstances, it was just a reminder that she was different from her sibling and that, you know, this was a child coming to the world and she thought the world was dangerous and it was unsafe for children. And also she probably wasn't going to get to see this child very often due to her circumstances. And these are all things that caused her significant emotional distress, which made she regressed to some behaviors that weren't necessarily beneficial, some maladaptive rather than adaptive strategies. But two, don't shame the behavior. Avoid phrases like, you're too old for this. Instead, try, it's okay, I'm here. Let's figure this out together. If we're regressing back not through choice, but because it just feels safer, then we need to try and help them to feel safe. And then we don't do that by telling somebody off and shouting at somebody. We do that by helping them to figure it out and helping them to feel safe again and recognize that it's safe to go back or build some new pathways, build mastery, self-esteem, and confidence. You may need to provide some level of emotional scaffolding as well. Regression is a signal someone needs more support, not more independence. Offer gentle encouragement and structure. I remember it was a lad within my world that, you know, when circumstances changed, sometimes he would go back and he'd definitely regress in his behavior. And we just kind of allowed it. Let him kind of build that connection, let him regress in some of his behaviors. Kind of go, it's okay. We accept you still as you are, whether you're moving backwards or forwards. One way that many people could think about this is, you know, maybe you've changed a diet, you've changed a lifestyle, but then you have a weekend where it all goes wrong and you don't go to the gym, you don't eat good meals, you regress back to old patterns of behavior. Well, if somebody just said, well, you've messed up now, that wouldn't really make you feel better. Hopefully, you're able to kind of go, hey, this is just a weekend. This is just a slip. I just needed this weekend. That's okay. And I can try again on Monday. I can do it again. I've done it once. If we are finding that an individual is experiencing this distress state, then sometimes we need to go back to the basics. So in the kind of the target system, we talk about the kind of stability, part of that trauma recovery model. But looking to where can we get the routines in? How can we help consistent boundaries? We're trying to create an element of predictability, because predictability is what helps people to feel safer. So we might need to go back to some stronger routines and some predictability to help that person to then grow when they feel ready. But also be patient and nurturing. Just like a baby cries when overwhelmed, so too do adults in their own way. Meet distress with calm, not control. So one key thing to think about when someone regresses, ask yourself, what would I do if they were 3 years old? Often that's exactly the response they need. And obviously with an adult, you can't necessarily pick them up and rock them in your arms, but it's that same level of availability, approachability, acceptance, validation, helping them to overcome the challenges they're experiencing rather than just telling them how they should be able to. When we misread regression as defiance or difficultness or whatever it is, we respond with discipline, or that's what our aim is. But when we understand it as vulnerability, we respond, or more likely to respond, with compassion. And that response builds trust, regulation, and real progress. It's remembering that through trust, the opposite to anxiety is not calm, it's trust. And if anxiety is causing regression, then we need to build trust through being a safe base, by being somebody who understands and helps them to regulate and overcome this. It's counter that most people think it as mollycoddling and need to toughen up. But sometimes toughening up just causes suppression, not self-management. It doesn't lead to healthy emotional management. It can lead to detrimental emotional management strategies, or I can't show these emotions because people will judge me as a result. Thanks for listening today. If this has helped reframe something for you, share it with someone else that you thought changed or could change through this process. Regression doesn't mean failure. It means a person trusts you enough to show that they're struggling. Take it as an opportunity for building connection and developing relationships and personal growth. Thank you very much.